What gives you the legal or ethical right to play a game that you did not buy? I'm going to bring this question up several times throughout this video, but I wanted to throw it out there right at the outset so that it remains at the forefront of today's discussion. What's up guys, Acer Thorn here and welcome to another video game industry discussion video. I do these analysis and discussion videos on a regular basis, so if you'd like to see more of them, hit that subscribe button to stay notified. Also, if you enjoy my content, please either whitelist my channel from your ad blocker or consider supporting me directly with either Patreon donations or channel memberships. So on Sunday, February 16th, 2020, I uploaded a video where I attempted to look at the issue of video game piracy from the perspective of the video game companies, hoping to help you see their side of the story, and hopefully show you that this isn't really just a case of dragons jealously hoarding their gold for no other reason than because F you. However, as I promoted this video on various message boards, responses that I received really made me a lot more sympathetic to game companies. Not just devil's advocate, but I honestly started to see them as the legitimate victims here. The first comment I received that really looked like it was a shameless person pretending to have some shame came from a Redditor named The Department. You may recall that I mentioned how buying used games on eBay is the legal way to obtain older games because that doesn't involve making new copies of the games in question, so the supply, and therefore the value of the games in case the game publisher ever decides to re-release the games, stays high. Well, the department writes, the most recent game I finished playing through, using emulation and, gasp, a pirated ROM, was an English translation of Akumajao Dracula X Chino Rondo for the TurboGrafx CD. For me to legally play this game, I would have to spend between $300 to $500 on eBay for a 32-year-old console. Used copies of the game run another $200 to $300. This leaves me with playing the Japanese game with no translation on hardware that is older than myself, assuming the console I just dropped that much money on continues to work and the disc hasn't developed bit rot. He then goes on to say, that's why I have absolutely no remorse for using emulation and ROMs, and don't expect it to change with emulation getting better and better. Okay, so your argument is that buying used games on the original hardware is simply too expensive? Is that it? I mean, that sounds like a legitimate argument at first glance, except for one problem. The entire argument is predicated on the assumption that you have the right, not just a legal right, but an ethical right as well, to play the game at all. So that begs the question, what gives you the legal or ethical right to play a game that you did not buy? Now, if you've actually bought the game and can't play it because the DRM servers were shut down, then you might have an ethical justification because you already went ahead and paid for the game. However, the department had the option to buy a used copy of the game on eBay, but that was just too expensive for him, so he decided not to buy the game at all and instead just pirate the game. If Akumajao Dracula X Chino Rondo is too expensive for you to play the legal way, then go find another game to play that's within your budget. You don't have the right to play that specific game unless you've legitimately bought it first. So if you really want to play that specific game, but simply don't want to pay its fair value, fair being determined by the supply of legal copies at the time you purchase it, not simply the MSRP at the time it was released, then you deserve absolutely no sympathy. What gives you the legal or ethical right to play a game that you did not buy? After that, I came across a string of comments from a guy called Sonic Kyle 27. This guy left a whole string of comments, but after the first two, you should get the general gist of where this conversation ultimately went, which is nowhere. His first comment states, well, what happens if you want to play it, but buying it isn't an option, and there's no other legitimate way to purchase it? Just say, well, looks like I can't play it anymore, and move on?
Yes! That is what you were supposed to do!
I don't see what's so complicated about this. Are you really just incapable of understanding and accepting that there are some things in the world you just can't have? Private jets, oceanfront homes, Taylor Swift's hand in marriage. There are some things in the world that you can't have, and apparently that's just unacceptable for you.
Obviously, you should never rape anyone, unless you have a reason, like you want to fuck somebody and they won't let you, in which case, what other option do you have? How else are you supposed to have an orgasm in their body if you don't rape them? I mean, what the fuck?
Now, the difference between C.K. Lewis's joke and the comments left by Sonic Kyle and the department is that, with C.K. Lewis, his statements are clearly meant sarcastically. They were designed to get a laugh. If he were being serious, I'm sure C.K. Lewis knows exactly what you're supposed to do if a woman won't let you fuck her. You're supposed to just shut up and accept that no means no. However, these two motherfuckers are advocating for video game piracy as an ethical practice simply because they want to play a game but don't want to pay the price that the owners of the game are asking for it, and unlike C.K. Lewis, they do not appear to be posting these comments with even the slightest hint of hyperbole. They genuinely come off like they believe in the righteousness of their stance. Imagine how this would work in literally any other aspect of life. I'm willing to pay a reasonable price for this painting, but the museum wants $50,000 for it. Or alternatively, they aren't willing to sell it to me at all. So I'm just going to break into the museum at night and literally fucking steal the painting because I have the right to this painting, even though I didn't make it and never owned it, and they're not willing to let me pay a reasonable price for it. So I kept chatting with Sonic Kyle. I repeatedly asked him the same question I've been asking throughout this video. What gives you the legal or ethical right to play a game that you did not buy? As I pointed out in my previous video, I showed you how a game company is indeed tangibly harmed by game piracy, even if they are not actively distributing the game at the moment. So I asked Sonic Kyle to show me why he has some overriding interest in playing the game that supersedes the game company's rights to keep the game valuable. To my utter astonishment, the only argument he even attempted to make is, it's ethically justified for him to do it. That is not an explanation. You cannot argue that X is ethical because X is ethical. That's not how logic works. So maybe one of you guys can actually produce a compelling argument in favor of ethically using ROMs and other forms of video game piracy. I'd like somebody to post a comment down below answering this question. What gives you the legal or ethical right to play a game that you did not buy? In addition to answering that question, here are a few other questions you can hopefully answer. Why do you believe your ethical right to play a game overrides the game company's right to keep their intellectual property in low supply and therefore highly valuable. For details, see my previous video where I point out how ROMs cause a game to lose its value. If you feel ethically justified in pirating a game simply because legal copies of the game are too expensive for you, then how do you justify that video games are the only aspect of life that should be subject to that kind of treatment? Do you also feel that you have the right to a Mercedes-Benz? And if you can't get one legally within your budget, do you feel you have the right to simply get in the driver's seat of one that you don't own and simply drive off with it, thus effectively literally stealing it? Because you're entitled to it, and therefore fuck anyone else's rights. Do you honestly feel, without any attempt at sarcasm or comedy, that you have the right to rape a woman because that really is the lesser of two evils compared to simply accepting that no means no? Remember, I established in the previous video that artificially increasing the number of copies of a game does indeed hurt the publishers, if not directly, then certainly indirectly. So what gives you the right to inflict that harm onto the game companies just because they aren't releasing games on your schedule? And when you post your comment, I would really like it if you stuck to tried and true methods for arguing ethics. A quick Google search can give you loads of information on how to structure your ethical arguments. The science of arguing ethics has existed since ancient Greece, with guys like Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle laying the foundation for ethical debates that are still used to this day. So you have no reason, other than sheer laziness, for not doing some research before presenting your ethical arguments. I hope that both of these two videos have enabled you to see the issue of video game piracy in a new light. It isn't just a case of dragons jealously hoarding their gold, it isn't just a case of babies not wanting to share their toys. There's actual business tied up in protecting your copyright, even if they aren't selling that game at the moment. And video game piracy is not nearly as harmless as you might think it is. So, with that said, I bid you all adieu. Acer Thorn out. Peace.